The cinema has been a place for people to be entertained for more than a century. Friends enjoying an action-adventure or a first date at a romantic comedy. The cinema generally has something for everyone. Stepping away from the real world and entering a world of fiction is usually a safe way to kill a few hours. Sometimes, though, real life can be more intense than what's on the screen. The Glen Cinema first opened in 1901 in the town of Paisley in Renfrewshire, Scotland. During the First World War, Paisley suffered greatly, with almost 2,000 of their men dying on the battlefield. Once the war was over, a memorial was commissioned where people were allowed to openly submit their designs. 195 entries were sent in, and the public raised £14,000 to construct the memorial, which was unveiled in 1924. You can still view the large bronze sculpture of an armored medieval knight riding into battle with 4 World War I soldiers following behind, in their uniforms, greatcoats, and helmets. The inscription reads, quote, "To the glorious memory of the 1,953 men of Paisley who gave their lives on land and sea in the Great War." Another interesting fact about Paisley is the case known as the Paisley snail. At a cafe in town in 1928, a woman found a dead snail at the bottom of her bottle of ginger beer. She subsequently fell ill and believed the snail was the cause of it. She then sued the manufacturer, and while that may sound fairly common in today's world, back then it was unheard of. The claim was one of negligence, but at the time the law stated the manufacturer would only be liable if there was a contract in place with the person who was harmed. Obviously, that meant anyone who purchased items from a store or a business was not covered. Donahue v. Stevenson followed, and the courts found the manufacturer was indeed liable and responsible for the harm caused. That saw a new type of liability drafted into law. Now back to the cinema. The Glen Cinema became known to locals as the Glen, and it was a popular site to visit. On December 31st, 1929, a children's matinee was held, a show put on during the daytime. Somewhere between 700 and 1,000 children excitedly piled into the cinema, chattering about the film that would be shown. They ranged in age from infants to 14-year-olds. Parents saw it as a great excuse to get the children out of the home so they could clean the house for New Year. To them, they thought they were sending their children off for a fun day at the cinema. How wrong that would turn out to be. Once the film was set to begin, the reel was placed in its metal canister. Once the show had started, an assistant film operator noticed a thick black smoke coming from the canister. He tried to smother it, but before he could, it sprung open, and smoke began to fill the screening hall from the spool room. Some of the children must have noticed the smoke and someone shouted fire, and there was a sudden rush to the exits. The children were pouring down the stairs at such a rate that they ended up piled tightly behind the escape door. Not only was the door padlocked, but it opened inwards, so had it been unlocked, children would likely still not have been able to escape. Some children in the upper balconies began jumping to the seats below to escape and onto some other children in the process. Emergency services were on the scene fairly quickly, and a police officer was able to unlock the padlock on the escape exit. Due to the children piled up behind it, the door could not be opened. The children who remained in their seats were ushered out by responding firefighters, with others being taken through windows that firemen had broken to access them. Once the emergency teams began finding the crushed children at the escape doors, they discovered 71 casualties and 30 to 40 injuries. They found the children had died from traumatic asphyxia, meaning they were crushed under the weight of the other children who were trying to escape. An inquiry was held in April of 1930, and that revealed that, on the very morning of the incident, the Paisley Fire Brigade had been at the Glen Cinema and pronounced it was safe following their inspection. James Graham, the owner of the cinema, was brought in to testify, and while he agreed that there were not enough exits, he did claim to have told the manager, Charles Dorward, on multiple occasions that the escape exits should be left open during matinee shows. Charles admitted to locking the doors to prevent children who had not paid from entering. The inquiry found that the fire started because of a short circuit caused when the film canister was placed on a battery in the spool room. The insufficient number of attendants to control the children, as well as the lack of exits, were blamed for the fatalities, as was the overcrowding in the screening hall. Charles Dorward was taken to trial on the charge of culpable homicide, but in the end he was found not guilty. The children who survived were offered a holiday on the seaside by Paisley Town Council, and a relief fund raised £5,300 for the injured and the families who lost children. That would be about £290,000 in today's money. On December 31st, 2009, 80 years after the tragedy, a memorial service was held to commemorate the lives lost. That has since become an annual event, even being hosted online when the attendees were unable to meet in person due to the COVID pandemic. Being mindful of just how things operate in any place that will be occupied by people should always be a priority, especially when constructing buildings that will be used by children. Children are much less likely to think rationally in an emergency, and ensuring they can escape safely needs to take precedence. After all, you never know when what's on the screen will become less scary than what's happening in real life. Thanks for letting us tell you this sinister story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and hit like, rate it, or leave a comment. Join us next week when we'll take you somewhere sinister.